Good morning. Happy Monday. Welcome to your early morning intuitive guidance. I'm Dr. Bonnie Nussbaum. Glad to be here with all of you today and waiting for my practical rebels to jump on here so that we can have a really powerful reading today. And last night as I was reading this, I thought to myself, I'm going to read this for YEMIG in the morning. Good morning, Abigail. Glad you are here. It looks like someone else has popped on also, but your name isn't rolling yet. So we'll see, say hi, and then I'll know who's here. As I was reading this part of the book last night, I thought to myself, I want to share this with YEMIG. Good morning, Lucy. Welcome, welcome. Two others of you are on here. Good morning, good morning. We're going to have a very powerful reading again today. It just seems like Spirit is plopping this stuff right in front of me to share with you. So I'm very excited about that. Good morning, Peggy. Welcome. Glad you are here. Everybody rolling in, all of those of us who need this reminder. Good morning, Cindy. I figured you'd be popping in quick. Good morning, Dawnine. Glad you're here. So, good morning, Carolyn. Hello, hello. As I was reading this, I was thinking, ooh, this is really good stuff. Good morning, Mel. Welcome, welcome. And when I read it again this morning, I was like, wow, this is really powerful stuff. And this is the kind of stuff that makes us all wince a little bit. But if we are brave, if we pay honor to the fact that we are star stuff, if we allow, oh, thank you, aren't they fun? A friend of mine gave those to me a couple of years ago. I love them. I think they're just very cool. If we pay attention to the fact that we have this light that is meant to shine, and that many of us, as women especially, we're taught to hide it under a basket. Mute yourself down, tone it down, don't be so loud, blah, blah, blah. And I'm seeing that in the other book that I'm reading at this point. Yes, I'm reading two books at once, which is about community organizing and how it was a male-dominated world, and the women had to find their own way to engage in community organization that worked for them, But today's reading comes from The Last Arrow. And the subtitle is Save Nothing for the Next Life. It's by Erwin Raphael McManus. I know several of you have ordered it already. And again, know that this is the divine masculine on steroids. That's okay. That's okay. There is a place in our world for the divine masculine. There must be. And there's a place within us for the divine masculine. There must be. But I also know that you can read this with the eyes of the divine feminine and find ways that may serve you better in terms of accomplishing what he's talking about here. And again, he's the kind of guy who calls out the pink elephant in the living room. He's not just going to let it be there stomping and shitting on the floor and whatever. He's going to call it out. So this may be uncomfortable, but know that it's a call to action. All right? So it's on page 106 for those of you who either have the book or are getting the book. And the chapter itself is called Act Like Your Life Depends on It. So there's various points in here where he's referencing things from earlier in the book. So I'll give you my thumbnail sketch, my Cliff's Notes version of what he's talking about there, and then we'll just keep going. It's several pages, but I think by the end of it, I'm hoping you're going to feel energized and motivated. So let's see what you think. A couple of nice deep breaths first, as always. In through the nose, out through the mouth. In through the nose, out through the mouth. And I want to tell you, I smirked a little bit as I was reading this again this morning because I took this challenge today. It's been a week since I fell, and I can still feel those ribs, man. Bruised ribs, and they are not happy with you for a long time after. This is actually the shirt I was wearing when I fell. You didn't see it last Monday because by then it was covered with mud and wet water and dirt, and it was just gross, so I had to change clothes before I talked to y'all. But I thought it was symbolic to put it on. And rather than hovering in the backyard where we have been, I made the choice to take TJ and go on our regular walk across the street, around the school, etc., etc. I felt two things. One, like my ribs had healed enough that were there another dog out there, I'd be able to correct him without a problem. And two, I needed to be brave. I needed to be brave and face what was very uncomfortable for me and just do it. Just do it. Thus, today's reading. Today we tend to focus so much on what we're supposed to do with our lives and how we can maximize our gifts and talents and potential. I've met so many people whose deepest struggles are about discovering their own destinies. At first I didn't see it, but after time the pattern emerged. We want God to prosper us. We want Him to give us abundant lives. We want God to make our dreams come true. We know we have talent. We feel there is greatness within us, waiting to be awakened. We have endless opportunities. Hear that again. We have endless opportunities. Yet somehow we feel paralyzed. It's as if all this God-given capacity is jammed up deep inside of us. And we are confused about this unsolvable puzzle of why we would want God to do more. It feels as if we become less, which provokes an interesting question. Can we be? And this is referencing, good morning, Susan. This is referencing an earlier part where he talked about the story of the 4 lepers and how because they had nothing else to lose, they entered a camp. They just wanted to survive another night. They entered a camp. All of the people of the camp had fled, and everything there was theirs for the taking. So we'll get to that. Can we be less than a leper left in the desert in the middle of a war waiting to die? And the answer is yes. It's a tragic yes. We can become hoarders who make sure that no one else can take what has been given to us, which means it loses all of its value. Okay, just my 2 cents worth. Ah, that's your favorite story in the whole book. Fabulous, fabulous. So let's see where he's going to go with this. The last arrow moves you past what God will do for you to what God will do through you. What God will do through you. So again, it's not, and in the U.S. we are very focused on me, 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 me. It's all about me, blah, blah. And he's really heading us the other direction. The last arrow strikes only when we must act not only as if our lives depend on it, but as if the lives of others depend on it as well. Too many of us act as though we have all the time in the world, while the world is desperately running out of time. As long as we are living for ourselves, we are still wandering in the darkness of the night. When you strike the last arrow, you have decided that there's no waiting for daylight. I love the surprise that is found in this story. 4 lepers, whose highest ambition was to survive and live one more day, found themselves the benefactors who provided a future for a hopeless people. When you act like your life depends on it, you will discover that your life was never intended to be only about you. When you choose to live, you become a source of life. It may be your risk, but it is never only your reward. The tragedy of a life that is never fully lived is not solely the loss of that one life. The tragedy is the endless numbers of lives that would have been forever changed if we had chosen to live differently. The way one of my former mentors talked about it was, you have a message to bring to the world. Yes, there may be other people out there delivering the same message. However, there are the people who are intended to hear that message only from you. They may already have heard the message from 10 other people, but they're meant to hear it from you. You're the one who's going to strike that chord in them that gets them moving off of plumb, okay? The call to live your most heroic life isn't so that you can sit back at the end of the day and know that you are a hero. In fact, the most heroic lives are lived by those who never think of themselves, but only of those for whom they have given their lives. So here he's sharing a story about that, where heroes come from. I met Luciano Morales in São Paulo, Brazil. I was struck by both his warmth and his intelligence. Luciano should have become a tragic statistic of abuse and abandonment. Even as he shared his story with me, he began with the disclaimer that he knew his story was not uncommon. I assure you it is. His mother was a heroin addict and was pregnant with Luciano when she was just a teenager. Her addiction was so severe that she kept using drugs even during her pregnancy. Those who knew his mother did not expect her baby to come to term, and the likelihood that the child would be born with huge birth defects and insurmountable physical and mental disabilities was almost certain. His father was a drug dealer and user as well, and this man's self-destructive behavior provided no protection for Luciano or his mother. When Luciano was born, the only people in the room were the mother who gave him birth and his father's mother, who came in spite of the fact that the entire family had chosen to disown him. His father did not bother to come. Most of his family did not bother to come. The room was practically empty. When Luciano came into the world, that room was a symbol of what he would find when he took his first breath. He was alone. The first 2 years of his life, his drug-addicted parents took care of him, if that expression can be used in any way to describe the world in which he lived. Luciano was not simply undernourished, but there were many days when he would go entirely unfed, unattended, uncared for. It was no small miracle that Luciano lived past his second birthday. His father disappeared and essentially became a stranger. His mother was assassinated when he was 12. When his father's parents could no longer bear to see the life of this small boy, the life this small boy had been born into, they stepped in and offered to adopt Luciano. He had a father and mother, but he'd never really had parents, and now, strangely, his grandparents would become his parents. And that's not so strange. There's a whole lot of grandparents raising kids. Even with a loving family, a place he could actually call home, it was unlikely that Luciano would ever overcome the deep wounds and unbearable trauma of his childhood. As a teenager, Luciano chose to leave home and make his own way in the world. When he was 21, he married his sweetheart, Cynthia, who at the time was only 19. I remember how, when we were driving together, he quietly expressed that he had felt certain the pain and scars of his childhood had a direct effect on the quality of his work and his personal capacity as a businessman. When I first engaged with Luciano while I was in Rio de Janeiro, he was in the midst of one of the most complicated business negotiations of his life. Good morning, Deb. Behind the scenes, the son of a heroin addict was negotiating the complexities of the 2014 World Cup. And in a time of political and economic turbulence, he was able to host one of the greatest events in the world. I can't quite put my finger on what Luciano does for a living. I just know that it requires him to fly to Geneva, Switzerland, to Chicago, Illinois, and to Sao Paulo, Brazil, not to mention other parts of Europe and South Africa. My best explanation is that he is both a serial entrepreneur and a strategic consultant to the highest tier of leaders in the world. He is unbelievably self-effacing, and one would be hard-pressed to ever get him to talk about his accomplishments, much less his acquisitions. But when I asked him how many jobs around the world he would estimate he has been a part of creating, he thought for a moment and rounded the number to 30,000. We might treat the story of 4 lepers who found themselves with enough wealth to save an entire city as an inspirational fable that has no basis in reality, and yet I know one of those 4 lepers. His name is Luciano Morales. Who would have ever guessed that saving the life of this one small boy in Sao Paulo, Brazil, would one day provide the livelihood for 30,000 people across the world? The next part is called a king's portion. You need to act like your life depends on it, because it's never just your life involved. Good morning, Judy. Welcome, welcome. That's one of the things I've found with people who are suicidal. They create an illusion in their head that it's only impacting them. They don't see, they no longer see. They've cut the cords to that concept that this is going to have a profound negative effect on many, many, many people. They don't see that. So that is one, thank you, Cindy. That is one of the things I try to instill in people who are struggling with suicidality. to look beyond themselves, to take those blinders off, to see that bigger picture. It's not that I want to guilt them into living, but I want them to really appraise the whole situation accurately. And oftentimes there's tons of illusions and delusions under there anyway that really need to be addressed. I think he's going to hit some of that. And yes, he does. And he's divinely masculine in how he does it. I would do it more gently, but this is where he's coming from. So let's just run with it. You need to never settle for less because the world desperately needs everything you can bring to the table. Be careful of embracing the type of spirituality that has a deep disdain for ambition and hides apathy behind a language of simplicity. If you want to live a simple life, that's a beautiful thing. If you want to use it as an excuse to live beneath your God-given capacities, that is negligence. I'm going to read that sentence again. That one whacked me right in the head, okay? If you want to live a simple life, that's a beautiful thing. If you want to use it as an excuse to live beneath your God-given capacity, that is negligence. Oof. Oof. I've always thought it odd that people who can create wealth would consider it more spiritual to choose a life of poverty. When we have assets, we can do things for people. Yes, we need to be discerning about what is offering someone a hand up, not a hand out. But when we are in poverty ourselves, it makes it more difficult to do for others. Money does give us some means of accomplishing things for others. Poor people don't choose to be poor. Those who are trapped in poverty do not choose to be trapped in poverty. We do not help the world by choosing to be less or do less. We help the world by choosing to be more and give more. I loved this line. Are you ready for it? Get ready to go, ooh. There is no virtue in being given 10 talents, but choosing to be satisfied with living as if we had only one. Oof. Remember that Elisha was angry with King Jehoash because he struck the arrow only 3 times. I wonder how many of us will find ourselves in conversation with the creator of the universe asking us, why did you settle for less? Why did you allow your weaknesses to define who you are? I love that question. Why did you allow your weaknesses to define who you are? That's the playing not to lose, not playing to win. Why didn't you act as if your life depended on it? Why did you give up on life? Why did you give up on me? You can almost hear the echoes of Elisha's voice. Why did you stop striking the arrow? Here's where he's a little strident, but know that it's going to speak to some of us. I would come about this a little more softly, but here's what he says. Stop bemoaning your circumstances. Stop drowning in your despair. Stop using your present crisis as an excuse to shrink back from the challenge before you. Pick up the arrow and strike. A leper is more powerful than a king if the leper is stepping into the life God created him to live and the king is not. And though they seem to live in completely different worlds, the leper and the king are connected. We are all connected. We act as though our lives depend on it. We need to act as though our lives depend on it because everything is connected and everything we do matters. There's a part in Mitch Albom's book, 5 People You Meet in Heaven, where as a boy, the man who's the protagonist engages in a behavior that impacts the death of another person. He doesn't even aware that happened. After death, one of the people he meets in heaven is that man who shares that story, and the boy can see the impact of the choice he made at that point. We feel this interconnection when someone else's life affects our lives, and we feel it when someone else's choices directly affect our choices. But more often than not, we underestimate how our lives affect the lives of others. We definitely do. So here's the section called Collateral Beauty. My friend Luciano Morales, the guy we were just talking about, asked if I would speak at an art exhibition introducing his daughter Deborah to the art world in the United States. She was only 17 years old and had already been accepted by 5 of the most prestigious art schools in the world. Soon she would be headed to Parsons, Paris to join an elite selection of artists who had been identified as the best in the world. It struck me how far removed, good morning, Cheryl. It struck me how far removed his daughter's world is from his mother's world. So his mother was the drug addict who died when he was 12. His daughter is this budding artist, and watch what she does with her talent. To describe Deborah's work as astonishing is an understatement. Her work is both imaginative and precise. Her art is both provocative and profound. It's hard to wrap your head around this level of skill and talent that can be contained in a 17-year-old. I asked Luciano when it was discovered that Deborah had this extraordinary talent. He said it was only 2 years earlier, when she was 15. There are those late bloomers, right? Luciano and Cynthia told Deborah that they would all be moving from Southern California back to San Paulo. Imagine telling a 15-year-old she has to leave California and all of her friends, all of the places she has come to know and love. Deborah would describe herself in that moment as unspeakably angry. And while her father was trying to explain to her why they needed to go back together as a family, she was frantically and feverishly doodling on a napkin, using it as a way of venting her anger and disapproval. When the conversation was over, her father saw the napkin and decided to put it in his pocket and keep it. He later asked her how long she had been doing things like this, and she said not long. He said, "You know, this is really good," and she responded that it was nothing. I have a son who's an artist, and he does the same thing, very self-deprecating. It's just something she did while she was angry. Then an opportunity, or a problem, depending on how you want to look at it, entered her life. She had a friend who was housebound because he could not walk and did not have a wheelchair. The wheelchair would cost around $5,000, and Deborah desperately wanted to make this happen for him. Then her father came up with the opportunity. A boat show was going to be taking place, and the owner, having seen some of Deborah's sketches, offered to create a gallery there where she could sell her work. How cool is this? Doors open, pay attention, doors open. She made 10 pieces of art in just a matter of days, and when the show was over, she had made $20,000. This was the first time anyone had seen her work publicly. This was the first time she had ever tried to sell a piece. With that $20,000, she was more than able to buy her friend's wheelchair, and with the rest of it, she funded 2 humanitarian projects in different parts of the world. Already at 17, she was seeing her art not simply as a way of expressing her own inner narrative or expressing her own God-given talent, but as a vehicle to do good in the world. For Deborah, art is more than something God has given her for her own fulfillment. Art is a resource that she has been entrusted with and a vehicle through which she can make the world a better place. So I want you to take that definition and apply it to yourself. What are the gifts you have? Okay? So I have a gift for motivating people. I have a gift for moving people to see things they don't otherwise want to see. It is a resource that I've been entrusted with and a vehicle through which I can make the world a better place. What's yours? Maybe you have many. Some people have many. I have this amazing client. She no longer sees me, but years ago, amazing client. She was gifted in so many areas. But she again had this self-deprecating thing of, jack of all trades, master of none. I mean, she was always ripping on herself in terms of those gifts she'd been given. So one of the things we were working on is, what are the ways you're going to advance those gifts? Yes, you could pick one of them and run with it as far as you can go, or you could manifest several of them to a higher degree than if you don't pay attention to them at all. But that was an interesting thing to work her through in terms of this multitude of gifts she had. Lucy is an inspiring, guiding light, and so it is. Yes, claim those gifts. Claim those gifts. That's not arrogant. God gave us these gifts to use to better the world. What are you doing to use your gifts to better our world? All right? All right, so let's go back here. I just love that. For Deborah, art is more than something God has given her for her own fulfillment. Art is a resource that she has been entrusted with and a vehicle through which she can make the world a better place. Yes, 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 yes. The son of an addict becomes the father of an artist. Born into a world of drug dealers, he gives birth to a world of dealers of hope. There is no way possible that Luciano, when he was 17 years old, could have seen how the choices he was making would affect his yet-to-be-born daughter when she was 17 years old. But we're all connected, and our choices are never only our own. They affect everyone around us and also have an effect on those yet to come. We create ripples. We create ripples. It would be nice if we could see the future. It would have been so much easier for those four lepers, if they could have seen the Armenian camp empty. No, Armenian camp, sorry. Abandoned. It would have required so much less of them. Think about the courage. Think about the courage they had. And again, they were feeling like nothing to lose, might as well go in. It would have required so much less of them if they could have known beforehand that there was the abundance waiting for them. It would have made it so much easier if they had just known that God had prepared the way. We don't get that luxury. Good morning, Barb. Glad you are here. The future reveals itself only when it becomes the present. That's a powerful statement, isn't it? The future reveals itself only when it becomes the present. This is why it's so important to act as if your life depends on it. Your actions have momentum. Every action has a reaction. Every choice ushers in the future. Listen to this next part. This is, again, another one of those cringeworthy statements he has. If you just sit there, if you just stand around and hope that the world will get better, if you settle for what it is because what you long for demands too much of you, then this thing called life will always seem elusive to you. Existence is a slow death. Mediocrity is like quicksand that slowly consumes you and sucks the life out of you. What will it take to create in you a sense of urgency? What conditions or circumstances will be necessary for you to finally refuse to surrender to death and make the hard choice to live? Living ain't easy. We all know that living ain't easy. But it can be very, very satisfying when we choose to dig our gifts out of the mothballs and put them to work to benefit ourselves and others. Okay? Most of us know it's spiritual to pray, but somehow we miss the fact that it's just as spiritual to act. Holy crap, huh? Holy crap. Very powerful stuff. There's another section that I'm going to save for a different day. But what are you being called to do? What are you being called to do? I will tell you, I am incredibly uncomfortable with the work I'm being called to do with regard to the intentional community. I feel like I don't know shit. But I'm going to have to figure it out, right? If I'm going to make this thing happen, I'm going to have to figure it out. And there are those around me who will help me. And he talks about that in the book also, because I kept reading after that point last night. He talks about that everyone who seems to be massively successful always has a team around them. Always has a team around them. I recently watched King Richard, which was the story of Venus and Serena Williams' dad. He had a team around them. He was their major cheerleader. They didn't have to accomplish it on their own. They had the support of each other, of him, of their mom, their other siblings, coaches, etc. over time as Richard pulled those people in. And again, there's a part in here that we're going to read the next time where it talks about how when you do this stuff, it isn't always well received. Because when you're willing to step out of it and use your gifts, it takes away everybody else's excuses for playing small. It's like being the person who comes onto the assembly line and is the rate buster, the one who does everything faster, more efficiently, blah, blah, blah. Makes everybody else look bad. They're not happy with you. They were happy happy, piddling along with their mediocre lives, not giving it their all, and then you show up and mess up the curve, okay? So, what are you going to do today to mess up the curve? What are you going to do today to be that person you're meant to be? What are you going to do today to drag your gifts out of the mothballs and dust them off a little bit and get them doing something useful for our world? What are you going to do today? Have an awesome day. We'll see you again tomorrow. Remember, you're capable of far more than you think you are. Bye-bye.